Welcome to Networking Unleashed Building Profitable Connections, the show where conversations aren't just social, they're strategic. I'm your host, Michael Forman. Most people walk into a room thinking about what to say, but high level professionals think differently. They think about how decisions are made, how value is perceived, and how to guide a conversation in a way that actually leads somewhere. My guest today brings that perspective. He believes you should think like a marketer, but talk like a CEO. That means moving away from random conversations and towards clear, intentional communication that reflects real business understanding. We're diving into how biases shape first impressions, why many professionals confuse activity with strategy, and how decision science plays a role in whether someone chooses to continue a relationship or not. If you want to elevate how you're perceived, communicate with more clarity, and turn conversations into real opportunity, you're in the right place. I'd like to welcome to the podcast Rich. Rich is an expert in everything that we just talked about. And I would like to introduce Rich and have him just give us the cliff notes of how you got where you are today.
Hey, Michael, good to see you, and thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, so I mean, I'll maybe work backwards from where I am today. So I've been the chief marketing officer of seven different companies in roughly the last 25 years, ranging from Fortune 500 large financial institutions down to privately held data companies and even a management consulting firm. I came to marketing. I wish I could say that I had a grand plan when I was getting into it, but the truth of the matter is, I was actually studying chemical engineering in college, and I spent a summer kind of working in the field at an engineering firm, realized that was not what I wanted to do, didn't know what I wanted to do. So I switched my major to economics. And again, just because I like math and science and numbers and those sorts of statistics, that kind of stuff. And I did again, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I applied for a 1 week internship during my junior year at a small credit card company based in Newark, Delaware called MBNA America. I spent a week down there and they offered me a job as a summer intern in the marketing department. And so I came back there for the summer, worked in the marketing department, loved it, ended up getting a full-time offer there. And so that's how it all began for me.
That's great. That's it. How you went from chemical engineering to marketing, it's probably even more of a story than what you just said.
Yeah, I
Because
gave my parents a little bit of whiplash, I'll be
yeah,
honest.
little bit, because that's quite a jump. Okay, you say think like a marketer, talk like a CEO. How does that shift the way someone approaches a networking conversation?
Yeah, so I think this is a really important concept, and it's something, again, I wish I had known when I was getting started, but I learned it by default over time. And that is, most marketers speak in using certain marketing terms, and they talk about what I would often consider second order KPIs, things like likes, page views, followers, awareness measurements, those sorts of things. CEOs, on the other hand, think more in terms of first order KPIs, things like revenue growth, ARR, churn, acquisition cost, right? Profit margin. And so when you as a marketer, and I see that I've coached and seen this mistake with a lot of junior marketers in the past, is they'll walk into a high level meeting with leadership and they'll start using marketing terms. And you can almost see everybody glaze over because when you're talking about likes and followers and awareness, the CEO is sitting there thinking, is any of this making us any money? In order to effectively rise up in your career, if this is the path that you're in, and even more importantly, be effective when you get there and be able to get your strategies and the things that you think the company should do and get buy-in and leadership team and board of directors to make all that happen. You really have to translate the marketing outcomes that you're looking at into business outcomes that the CEO is going to care about. And if you're not making that connection in your discussions, your presentation, you're probably not going to be successful. And you certainly also run the risk of losing the confidence of the rest of the C-suite.
Well, you have to know your audience, first of all. Know who you're talking to. Know whether you're talking to your peers, whether you're talking up the chain, or you're talking down the chain, because your talk should be different for all three. And
Right.
knowing fully well that you have to realize that you have to talk about the money coming in and coming out when you're talking up the ladder, because their thought process is different than that those that are below. Those are below, you can talk about getting likes, dislikes, and all that kind of stuff. But when I go in and I do a workshop, I have to see whether I'm talking to C-suite executives or I'm talking to the masses. So I know
Yeah,
exactly what you're talking
yeah, that's totally right. And that's true with most everything that we do, right? Just from our marketing, sales, communications perspective, always need to know your audience. I think the in this for this particular case example, it really requires some ability to think about the projects and the things that you are recommending that the company take on almost as an investment portfolio. So imagine that you have this new campaign that you want to launch. Great. Imagine that instead of going to the CEO and asking for approval or going to your management team and asking for approval, imagine if you had to find investors to fund that project, right? How would you talk to an investor about funding that project? That's how the CEO wants to hear it, right? That's the language that the CFO speaks to the CEO, right? And that's usually one of the strongest relationships in the C-suite is the CEO CFO relationship. So if you can start talking in terms of investment, in terms of how that ties to the company's objectives, you're singing the same song that the CFO sings, and you have a much better chance of building confidence within your leadership team and getting the things that you want to get done accomplished.
That's a very good line to draw. And I never really thought about that, but you're right. If you're saying, if you're trying to speak to somebody that's going to give you money, then you're talking the language of the CEO, the CFO, and everything else. That's a very good line. What's the difference between someone who sounds busy and someone who sounds like they understand how business actually works?
Again, I think it really comes back to tying your activity to the outcomes that are important to the organization. You're just saying I often tell my teams when we get into a staff meeting, just by way of example, that I don't want a weather report. I don't want you to sit there and tell me about all the things that you did last week. That's not a fruitful conversation, right? What I want to hear is, are our objectives on track or not on track? And
Mhm.
if they're not on track, what do we need? What do you need? What resources do you need? What changes do we need to make? Who do I need to talk to? Right? If they are on track or ahead of track, great. Anything that we can do to even make it better and capitalize on that and get something done faster. Right? So really the weather report about what you did last week is not really useful or important. And the same is true when you walk into your CEO's office or you walk into the boardroom. They don't want a weather report about all of the great things that you've done. It's not of interest to them. What they want to know is how are the things that you're doing affecting the objectives that the company cares about? How are they affecting revenue? How are they affecting churn? How are they lowering acquisition costs? Those are the things that they want to hear, not all the activity that you did, because they can't make that connection. You're making them do too much work. It's quite honestly. They're not going to make that connection between all of your activity and the outcomes. So you have to talk just in terms of outcomes.
Absolutely. It's not a social event that you're going in and have to sit down. You're being called in for a reason, right? And the reason is tell me what's going on. Tell me how all of this is going to make us money. He's not saying how's it going to make me money? How's it going to make us more profitable? and you have to be not robotic. You have to get all that ancillary stuff out of the way, the weather report, everything else out of the way, and just give him all the facts and figures, and then see where the conversation leads you.
And there's another just important thing, aspect to this, and that is that there's the board of directors and the CEO, they tend to be very loss averse. Like all of us, loss aversion is a common cognitive bias that we all have. So one good way to position the things that you're doing or the things that you want to do is instead of, and a lot of marketers will go in and talk about, we're going to acquire all these new customers and we're all the gains that you're going to make by doing your project. It's sometimes more effective to go in and reframe those as risk avoidance as opposed to gain seeking, right? If you walk in and you say, hey, here's an investment opportunity that will help us help us not lose revenue that's already in our system. If you're talking about, let's say, a nurturing campaign to existing leads, right? Hey, here's an investment opportunity that we're going to do that's going to help us capture revenue, help us not lose revenue that's already in our process. Right. Okay, that's probably going to get a lot more attention than, hey, here's something that we can do to try to get a few more customers out of the leads that we already have.
Good point. Good point. Many professionals take a spray and pray approach to networking. What does more intentional, scalable approach look like in real conversations?
Yeah, again, it comes back to knowing your audience and being really crystal clear on whether it's from a networking perspective or even from a marketing, sales, and communications perspective, but just to focus on networking for a moment. You can walk into, let's say you're going to a trade show. You can walk into the trade show and you can randomly meet lots of people, and you have 48 hours, 72 hours that you're going to be there. You have everybody from a particular industries coming together in one place at one time. And if you just walk in and just randomly go through, yeah, you might get lucky and meet some people that will actually help you, your career, your business. But if instead you take a look at the companies that are going to be there, you go on LinkedIn, sometimes people even post attendees, depending on if you're sponsoring you can get an attendee list, but really get into, okay, who's going to be there and make yourself a target list of the people that you would really like to meet when you go there and make a point of meeting as many of them as you can. Seek them out, find them, meet them. That's going to be a much more effective way to network than just, oh, I'm going to the conference. There's going to be a lot of great people there, and I'm just going to randomly walk around and meet folks.
Absolutely. That's called strategic networking. And I went to the school of hard knocks. I learned how to do everything wrong before I did it correctly. And one very important fact that I remind myself every time I go to a networking event, and my suggestion is find 2 networking meetings a week and go and just network your heart out. But you go and you don't go thinking you're going to sell something, whether it's yourself or a company or something else. You're going there with what's called a servant's heart. You're going there to see whenever you find that person and you sit down with them, how can I make you more successful? How can I be a good referral source for you? And by doing so, it takes all the pressure off you and it puts your conversation right at the top of the list. And as that person is talking, because you know as well as I do, everybody loves to talk about themselves. So they talk and talk and talk, and you're getting all the information you can by asking questions and everything else. But that's how you strategically network and do that with confidence and everything else.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I like the way that you position that as a servant's heart. I always call it helper mentality, which is getting at the same thing. You go into it not thinking about what can they do for you, but think about what can you do for them. And what they do for you will just come naturally from that conversation. I think the same is true in sales conversations as well, too, even outside of the realm of networking. If you're oftentimes salespeople view themselves as here and the potential buyer as here from a status and power perspective. So they go in with that mentality of almost like you're getting an audience with the king. And really, what's far more effective from a sales perspective is to go in with a helper mentality as well and think about, hey, we're two business people, we're here, and we're trying to figure out together whether what we have is going to advance what you need. Right. And so it's like business person to business person. And it's not about sales, it's about helping. It's about helping them be successful. And if you're able to figure out a way to help them be successful, that's going to translate into revenue for your organization and success for yourself.
Absolutely. And I talk about this all the time. When you go in and you meet with somebody in their office, you have about 30 seconds. You look on the walls, on their desk, you see what they have. What type of pictures do they have? Do they have music, art, a picture of their son, their grandson? And you take all of that in because I developed something called, for I didn't develop it, I stole this, by the way. FORM, family, occupation, recreation, and a certain message, and take any one of the above and get them to talk about what you something about their family or occupation, recreation. You don't want to immediately walk in and start talking business, right? You want them to get easy, that trust, that know you, like you, trust you, they're going to do business with you. And the only way to get to that trust is to start the conversation like that.
Yeah, again, completely agree with that approach. There's a tendency, and a cognitive tendency that we all have is that we tend to like people who are like us. And you're more likely to buy from someone who you like and you feel some rapport with. People buy from people, not companies. Big
Exactly.
misnomer, right? Like people buy from people. So it's really, even in the sales environment, it is almost the same as networking in a networking environment, very similar. And that's really the key to being successful there.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. How do biases and first impressions influence whether someone takes you seriously within the first few minutes?
Yeah, I think we just talked about a really good example. If people buy from people who are like themselves, so doing things that can help you build rapport, and you can't be inauthentic, you can't be someone who you're not, but showing an interest in them as a person, right? I think that your form framework is great, and that would be a good one to follow. But that is definitely one of the clear cognitive biases. We talked about loss aversion as well. And this is another one that you really need to keep in mind as a salesperson. We as human beings experience the pain of a loss at about 2 times greater than the pleasure from an equivalent gain, right? So if you lose $100, it hurts twice as bad as if you found $100 on the street. All right. What that means for a salesperson is that your price, the value that you're providing has to exceed the cost of implementation by at least 2 to 1.
Okay.
And the cost of implementation is not just the price of your product. It's also what other investments did they need to make to get the value out of your product? How much effort and political capital does your champion have to expand to get the contract through procurement, legal, compliance, right? Finance, all of those steps. All of that is part of the cost. So you really need to keep in mind, hey, what are all of the costs that my buyer is going to incur? And how do I demonstrate value that's at least twice as good as all of that cost?
Absolutely. And one thing that you're always trying to do as you connect with people is to bring value to the conversation. You're always trying to, because you don't want to just walk up to somebody or see somebody or meet with somebody, hand them your business card and say, "This is what I do," because that will immediately turn you off. But if you go in and bring value to the conversation, you're bringing value, and he'll be much more receptive. She'll be more receptive to what you have to say.
Absolutely.
What language or framing immediately signals strategic thinking rather than tactical thinking?
Yeah, we've talked about this a bunch already, but it really is translating tactics into strategic outcomes. Very similar than what we talked about earlier about how would you go into your CEO's office and talk about your results last quarter, right? You wouldn't go in and talk about all of the things that you did. You would talk about the outcomes of those things. So, if you want to be taken seriously at the executive level, you really have to talk in business terms, not in the terms of your own function. Translate what you're doing into how it affects the business, how it ties to the business's outcomes and the objectives that the company cares about.
Yeah, I remember 100 years ago when I was younger, whenever I was starting a job or position, I was being interviewed, I would always say something like, he would always say, "What are you looking for?" And I would say, "I'm looking for your job," or "I'm looking above your job," or something like that. Whenever I got in, I wouldn't look at my boss, but I would look at my boss's boss, and that would be the level I would always try to achieve. And most of the time I achieved it. Once in a while I did, but that's all right. That's a story for another time. Okay. Where do professionals unintentionally create confusion when explaining what they do, and how does that affect opportunity?
Yeah, so this is something that's a little bit counterintuitive, right? When someone asks you what you do, you're likely to answer very literally, right? I am a blank at blank company, right? This is my job title, right? This is my like functional title. And that doesn't really help who you're talking to understand anything about what you do, right? Okay, it might give them a little inkling. Okay, he's a bank executive or she's a healthcare professional, but that's your title of your job. That's not what you do, right? So what you do is should be framed in terms of the value that you're creating in the world. I help sick people get better if I'm a doctor, right? If I'm in the mortgage business, I help people get the home that they want at a cost that they can afford now and pay for it over time. Put your occupation in terms of how it affects the rest of the world. And that's going to be one, it's going to be a lot more memorable because everybody says the title, it goes in one ear and out the other. So it's going to be a lot more memorable. So they're going to tie it to you. And it's going to give them an idea of the value. Why would I want to know this person? Okay, it's all about the value that you're creating in the world, not your title or the organization that you work for.
Absolutely. And I teach this with all of my clients. I tell them not to, don't tell me what you do. Don't give me your title. Give me the results of what you do. And if once you give me the results, we'll put it into some sort of a little two-sentence story, and that'll make the person you're talking to feel much better rather than giving them some title. So
Yeah,
give
and
them
you're employing another technique there. Storytelling is super powerful. And I like that a lot, actually. I might steal it from you. But
go ahead.
but yeah, like telling stories as human beings, think about recorded history, writing has only been around for what, 6,000 years, something like that. Most of our evolution, the way information and learning and knowledge was passed on from one person, one generation to the next was by telling stories. So we are hardwired to love stories. And if you can give somebody a story about what they're doing, and really, I like to try to tie that to the purpose of the organization, right? Purpose or mission, vision. Different companies use different terms for that. But like, how is what you're doing? Tell a story about how what you're doing is driving the purpose of the organization.
Absolutely. I employ that whenever I speak, whether I'm doing a workshop or I go across the country and I speak about this exactly. And I always bring humor into my stories because once you have a story, you bring humor into it, they won't forget it. They'll forget my name, they'll forget what I look like, but they won't forget the story with the humor. And I start with that and I usually end up with that. So it's a very good mix, but that's a great way to have the person remember who you are.
Right. And if you can make it rhyme, even better. There is
Even
actually a
better.
cognitive bias called rhyme as a reason. So we tend to believe that things that rhyme are true, even
Okay.
if they're not, right? And there, just think about all the, I mean, sure, my grandmother told them to me, everybody's probably did. Phrases like, I'm from Philadelphia. And so Ben Franklin, it's widely attributed to be said, early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and rich, prosperous. No,
No.
we all know how to finish it. And
Right.
it sounds true because it rhymes. So if you can tell a
Yes.
story and make it rhyme, you're like masterclass.
One step above. And I'm going to have to try to put that into my talks. So I'm going to use that. What role does clarity play in becoming referable and memorable in a crowded professional environment?
Yeah, look, it is everything. And I think it's not just from a personal perspective, but it's also a corporate or company perspective. It's we all want to work with specialists, not generalists. So if you're trying to be something for everybody, you're going to end up being nothing for anyone, right? People need to understand that what you do is for them, and you're the specialist at solving the problem that they need to solve. If you need knee surgery, you're not, and what are you going to do? Okay, you could start to look at call the local hospital, right? Start to look at some surgeons in your area. You're probably also likely to talk to your golf buddy and or friends that you have, someone that you know who had similar surgery recently. Who did they go to, right? You're looking for not the doctor that does shoulders, elbows, wrists, and knees. You're looking for the doctor that does knees, right? You want
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
knee guy in your city, right? Or the knee lady in your city. You don't want to just go to you might find a great doctor who does lots of things, but you're still looking for a specialist. And the same is true when you're promoting yourself, trying to grow your career or land a job with a new organization, or you're trying to build and launch a company or launch a product. It really comes down to be really specific. And the more specific you can be about who it's for and what you're doing, right? It makes it consumable to your buyer. It's a lot easier for them to understand whether what you do is for them or not for them. I often say, look, I'm not trying to be everybody's cup of tea. I want to be a few people's glass of champagne.
Very good. I tell my clients all the time, clarity is key. You need to clarity, you need to be clear, but here's the big thing, especially with my clients, enunciate. You have to be able to enunciate where the other person understands you and then become clear. Because if you're clear your message, but you're not enunciating, you're mixing everything up and really they'll just turn you right off. They'll say, okay, thank you very much. And they'll go on to the next person. So those are two very important things. Okay, let's bring this podcast full circle. If a listener wanted to elevate how they are perceived in conversations over the next 90 days, what's one communication habit would you tell them to start immediately?
Yeah, I'd say immediately stop talking about exactly what you do and start translating what you do into the value that it creates and talk about the value that you create. Because again, that's what people care about. And when I say people, friends, family, employer, everybody around you, that's what they care about, right? They don't care about your activity. They care about the value that activity generates. So, as you want to think about being more effective in communicating, if it's about yourself, it's about the value that you're creating. If it's about your organization, it's about the value that the organization is creating. That's going to be much more effective in capturing the attention and reaching and getting people to remember who you are and know, what you do and care about what you do.
Absolutely. Rich, this was absolutely spectacular. And I can see why you went from the chemical engineering to marketing, because you know your stuff. If somebody
Thank you.
wanted to get hold of you and they wanted either to hire you, to say hi to you, or whatever, what's the best way for them to get hold of you?
Yeah, the easiest way to find me is my website. It's richmsmith.com. You can book time with me there. You can learn more about what we do with our growth studio. We work with organizations to help them get unstuck and scale and get to the successful outcomes that many CEOs and founders want. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, and I have a podcast as well. It's on all the channels, so I'm out there.
Okay, great. This conversation is a reminder that strong networking isn't about saying more, it's about saying what matters. When you communicate with clarity and understand how people think and make decisions, your conversations naturally carry more weight. Take one step this week. Simplify how you can explain what you do to somebody. I'm sorry. Simplify how you can explain what you do so someone can immediately understand the value. Clarity is what makes you memorable, and being memorable is what leads to opportunity. If you found value in today's episode, please make sure you like, follow, and subscribe to Networking Unleashed, building profitable connections, so you keep getting the best insights on networking and communication. And share this episode with someone ready to move from casual conversations to strategic connections. If you'd like to help strengthen how you communicate and position yourself in conversations, visit Forman to learn how I work with professionals, teams, and organizations. So until next time, think strategically, communicate clearly, and build connections that move business forward. Rich, you were a great guest, and I can't wait. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much, Michael. I really enjoyed the conversation this morning. Appreciate you having me on.
Well, hold on, folks. Don't go anywhere. Let's hear from our sponsors. David Neal, co founder, Revved Up Kids. Revved Up Kids is on a mission to protect children and teens from sexual abuse, exploitation, and trafficking. They provide prevention training programs for children, teens, and adults. To learn more, go to revvedupkids.org. Henry Kaplan, Century 21. When it comes to making the biggest financial decision of your life, leave it in the hands of a proven professional, Henry Kaplan. Henry is a global real estate agent with Century 21, celebrating his 41st year in business. No matter where you're moving, Henry has the right connections for you. You can contact Henry at 561 427 4888. A huge thank you to our guest for sharing such incredible insights today. And of course, a big shout out to you, our amazing listeners, for tuning in and spending your time with us. If you're interested in my digital courses, being coached, or having me come and talk to your company, just go to Michael and fill out the request form. Remember, networking isn't about being perfect, it's about being present. So take what you've learned today, get out there, and make some meaningful connections. If you've enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who could use a little networking inspiration. Let's keep the conversation going. You can find me on Apple, Spotify, Pandora, YouTube, or my website, forman.com/podcasts.